Hello all, Ben Shute here with a few thoughts today on career-related matters for aspiring young violinists. Now, of course, there's much more than we can possibly fit into a short conversation like this, but I did want to try to condense some major things down into a few points that will then help you deal with the specifics later. And the reason I wanted to do this is just because we spend so much time learning to play our instrument well, and we aren't always as well prepared to address the question of, okay, so what do I make of this? How do I find its expression in the real world? So I hope there will be some points here that will be helpful at whatever stage of career planning you're at. So first big point, and this is kind of a preliminary to everything else. Know your field and know the standards in your field, whether that's violin playing in general or whether you have your sights trained on something specific like orchestra playing or chamber playing. Really, really important that you have a sense of both the technical standards and stylistic achievements in that field. Otherwise, it's going to be very challenging. And I find it curious when I encounter students who want to be musicians, but either are completely unaware of the major personalities in the field, past or present, and the standards they exemplify, and or seem disinterested in being shown those standards, seem disinterested in being pushed toward the highest possible level, and think that what they're doing right now should be good enough. That's a very difficult and unfortunate mindset, and sometimes in America we have to realize that there can be a certain degree of entitlement. It's one of the downsides that has come as a negative consequence of some of the things that have been America's strengths. But a potential negative consequence can be this sense of entitlement that says, I should already be good enough. Why do I need to feel like I have somewhere to go? Why do I need to feel like I haven't arrived yet? I'm supposed to be there. I'm supposed to be exceptional. And one sees that too frequently, and I would just urge you to be very careful not to fall into that, because that's fatal for any kind of growth, and especially artistic growth. So know the standards in the field, and be aware that artists, however great an artist you are, one of the cardinal features of artistry is being ready and willing and eager always to grow. The great pianist Schnabel made a comment that he was talking about something slightly different, but it's relevant here, that at that point in his career, he preferred to focus only on the repertoire that he most loved, and he said it in terms like repertoire where the deeper you go into the mountains, the farther away the peaks become. You're going up the mountain, but the mountaintops just keep getting further. And that's something that we have to acknowledge as artists, that we're always in pursuit of something. The better we are as artists, the more we see that there is to do. And that's a wonderful thing. And we're chasing this ideal of perfection, knowing that we'll never get there, and we don't need to beat ourselves up because of that. The purpose of artistry is not to become a perfect robot, or perfect anything. It's the human pursuit of digging deeper into this beautiful art and making the most wonderful thing that we can. And that only becomes disappointing to us when we've staked our identity on becoming something perfect or becoming absolute. And that's something that we have to relinquish. But we also have to balance that with knowing those standards and going for them eagerly, because without that, it's really not possible to succeed. Okay, so point number one, know your field. Point number two, be an artist. Now, being an artist and playing artistically won't get you the career, but it is your soul. And what does it profit you if you gain all of the concert stages in the world but have forfeit your artistic soul, right? So be an artist. In order to do that, again, by way of prerequisite, you want to be in a state where we're delving into the depths of the literature, where expressing that through sound on your instrument and expressing it at a very high level is something that resonates to you, something that moves you and is fulfilling to you. And if not, it's fine. But it would make it challenging to become a vocational musician. However talented you are, right? Just because you have aptitude at something doesn't mean that you have to go that route as a career. And I've had many friends who've struggled with things like that. They're extremely talented at many things, but say music, just the idea of a music career just doesn't feel fulfilling to them, and they feel almost guilty about pursuing something else that they might love more. And there's no guilt or shame in that. Um, it just comes with being talented in multiple areas. For me, one field is plenty, so I'm happy to I'm happy to be in music, but that's me. Um, so so you want to make sure that doing your craft and doing it really well resonates with you and is fulfilling, because if not, either the music world's going to be a closed door, or it's just going to be deeply frustrating. It'll probably drive you drive you mad. Um, so so when I say that playing excellently has to resonate with you, by playing excellently, I don't mean playing lots of notes and or playing fast, right? Playing excellently means being able to play any music, including and perhaps especially the simplest music, very, very well. And then you can add whatever fireworks to that you like. But I'll tell you, the more I play the violin, and I think this is the experience of many or most people, the more I play the violin, the more I find that what I'm working on are actually the basic things. And I play difficult music better than I did 10 years ago, not because I have faster fingers, but because my basics are better. Um, so so that's something that we have to recognize when we're talking about excellence in playing. That any piece, because violin 901 is violin 101 in some ways, that playing anything well represents a challenge that we have to be willing to embrace. And as soon as we say, "Oh, I can do that without thinking," or that's I don't that requires no investment from me, then we've fallen into a mindset that's going to be very difficult. Really, I'd say that's counterproductive to artistry. And again, something that we in America have to be careful of. I've often encountered a curious hierarchical mindset when it comes to repertoire difficulty, and sometimes almost by implication repertoire worth. So we'll say that such and such is a first grade piece, such and such is a fourth grade piece, and such is a 10th grade piece. So the result of that is I've been, say, at summer festivals, and I'll see a student who I've worked with a couple of summers before, and they'll say, "Oh yeah, I did the third Mozart concerto," and they'll say or imply something that suggests, "So I'm beyond that." And I think, "Oh really? Okay, good for you," because I'm certainly not. But we very often get this funny idea that there are pieces that are attached to certain ages or certain levels, and then once you've played that, you're done, you're past that. And that's very, very unfortunate, because I mean, first of all, apart from just all the technical demands that Mozart presents, those sort of ever deepening technical demands, right? It's just wonderful music. And as soon as I think, "Oh, that's a kiddie piece," which is absolutely not. But I mean, if I ever fall into that mindset, I'm not going to really be able to invest as an artist. Never mind be ready to embrace the technical challenges that it presents of getting ever deeper into the precise articulation and the kind of subtle phrasing that Mozart needs, and the always making the characters more and more distinct. I mean, those are things that take, there's no other word for it, but technique. I mean, they're musical, but in order to do that, you need great technique. And if your definition of technique is just being able to play scales and thirds fast, then that whole realm of artistry and expression is going to be a closed door. So in being an artist, excellence has to resonate with you, and that excellence means being able to play well and being able to embrace the simple challenge of any repertoire, however simple it appears on the page or however complex. You need to be able to deliver it as music and as something that will be meaningful to people and cleanly and well delivered. Okay, so be an artist, and with that, be substantive. Right? Relish going deeper and deeper into the music you love. Be substantive. Be sincere. I think that's very important. We live in an age of gimmicks, and conventional wisdom is that you won't make it without a gimmick, and I very, very much dislike that, and that's something I'm not willing to accept. It's true, if you have a gimmick, you will probably get there faster, or get somewhere faster. Um, but I don't think if you I think that's an infirm foundation to build on. And if your career and identity is built on gimmicks, I think there will be certain heights that you can't reach. Now, whether everyone who is sincere will reach the heights that someone has attained by gimmicks, I can't say, and probably not, right? Career is never given, but I would rather be a sincere musician and not have a particularly remarkable career, as long as I can have the kinds of artistic outlets that I want and can communicate with people. Um, I would rather do that and be sincere than be gimmicky and flashy and have this and that and whatever. Um, and I would advise that that is a good course to pursue. That's not my course, obviously. That's you know I'm merely following in the footsteps of many people whom I deeply, deeply admire. So be substantive, be sincere, be yourself. Remember that you are never competing against Heifetz, let's say, or Oistrakh. Heifetz is Heifetz, Oistrakh is Oistrakh, Vengerov is Vengerov, Hilary Hahn is Hilary Hahn, and everyone is unique. It's like a fingerprint, right? What that means is that at the end of the day, I don't have to choose between, say, Heifetz and Oistrakh and Adolf Busch. They're all individual, and someone like I mentioned this in another video, Adolf Busch, one of my favorite interpreters, particularly of Romantic German music. He was never as clean or just as brilliant as Heifetz, technically, but that doesn't bother me because he offered something that only he could offer. His job was to be the best Adolf Busch he could be. I listen to him because he's Adolf Busch, and I appreciate that he became the best Adolf Busch that he could be. And that's where we all are. We strive toward the highest standards of excellence, but at the end of the day, each of us has something unique to offer, and we can only be the best of ourselves that we have to offer. And it's not a matter of comparison as to who's better or this or that. It's just we can enjoy the uniqueness of every person, and out of that joy, we try to make each personality as defined, as beautiful as it can be. So I think that's a helpful way to think about artistry. So first point, know your field. Second point, be an artist, be substantive, be sincere, be yourself. Third broad point, prepare well. And I don't just mean practice hard, right? Practice is important, but you have to be prepared to enter the real world and be prepared for the things that you will need to do in order. There are very particular things in different fields that you need to do in order to get where you want to get. I mean, if you want to be an orchestra player, you have to be ready to take an orchestra audition and play at a level that will win the audition. Preparation for that is extremely important. So, you think about, if a plane is taking off, you don't just put a plane at the end of a runway and say, okay, off you go, right? The plane has to be gathering momentum and then take off by the end of the runway. Well, whenever that end of the runway is for you, if it's when you graduate from, whatever degree you're taking, or whenever that time is, there will come a point when you need to be able to spread your wings and be off and running. I know I've just mixed way too many metaphors there, but that you need to have that momentum already in place. So it's important to have career trajectory in mind. So career goals and plans for getting there several years before you enter the real world. And now I'm not saying that has to be fossilized and set in stone, right? We're not fossils. We're living and breathing and changing human beings, and we need to embrace that. And life will, I guarantee you, life will throw surprises at you, and you will find yourself doing and thinking and feeling things that you just would not have expected 1, 5, or 10 years earlier. That's just the nature of being a human being. So with that flexibility in mind, it's still wise to say, this is a career trajectory that at the moment I think I would like to pursue and to prepare for that. So have those concrete goals several years out and work toward them strategically. So, for example, if you want to be in an orchestra, find a teacher who can guide you in and really coach you well in how to prepare for an orchestra audition. You need to be a great player because you'll need to play a one or maybe a romantic concerto and a classical concerto, and they'll want you to be a great player, a great soloist. Um, and then you also have to be a great orchestra player, which is a separate skill in itself. Um, and someone who can coach you through the audition process, and in consultation with your teacher, if you're ready at that point to start taking auditions, it can be helpful to have a teacher or mentor to coach you through that process and coach you through auditions, one after the other, and just to give you some pointers. And again, there's no shame in that, as if getting ready for the professional world you shouldn't need outside opinions. A concertmaster of one of the big American orchestras had mentioned that in preparing for his audition, I think he worked with a friend for something like 4 hours a day on intonation, right? And that's, again, violin basics are the advanced matters. You want to be concertmaster of a major orchestra, your just plain simple intonation has to be really solid. So working with a friend 4 hours a day just to get ready for that, and that is absolutely something that you can expect, is par for the course as far as getting ready for an audition. So find a teacher who can mentor you through that. If you want to, say, be a private teacher, and private teaching is one of the areas where there's probably most demand, right? Getting an orchestra job, full-time jobs in academia, these things are, they're harder to come by. There are fewer of them, and it's more the sort of thing where there's opposition that opens, and one person out of sometimes hundreds of applicants fills it. Whereas private teaching, really something that you can build yourself, and in most areas there is a market for that, and sometimes quite a substantial market. So if that's something you want to do full-time, or if that's something that you see yourself doing part-time or for a while as you're building things, consider laying the foundations for that while you're still in school, especially if you're studying in an area where you then want to live. And if you see yourself staying there, consider starting to build a studio before that becomes how you have to make your money, so that, again, you have momentum when the time comes. Find chamber music partners. If you want a solo career, find a teacher who can really help you solidify your artistic personality, and coach you through the steps and timing that goes with being a soloist. And do you need to do competitions, and when, and all of those sorts of questions. Now, here perhaps I should take a brief detour to say a word about the competition circuit. In my experience, if you're wanting to be a soloist or chamber musician, you need to have management, because things like concerto solos or appearances on concert series are negotiated between the administration of those organizations and artist management firms. And if you try to get engagements just by sending letters and press kits and that sort of thing, you're probably not going to get replies. So if you want a solo or chamber career, management is really quite essential, and the way to get management is through auditions and competitions. So, some people, and I heard growing up that not everyone needs to do competitions. Sometimes if you've got a career, then you don't need competitions, and that's true. I think there are a few cases where someone coming of an age where others would otherwise do competitions finds they already have enough momentum in the career that they don't really need to go that route. And that's fine if you find yourself in that situation. But if you come of an age where competitions are feasible and advisable, and if you don't already have that career momentum, and it's not doesn't mean you're not a fine artist if you don't. It just it depends on all sorts of things. If that's the case, then you may need to be proactive and enter the competition circuit in order to get the management, in order to be heard by the people who need to hear you. So my own background, when I was of an age to do competitions, I made the decision not to go the international competition route. For reasons that I now feel differently about all of them. I'm not saying I regret the decision, because the person I am now is different than the person I was then. So to try to analyze me then through the lens of me now is, it's kind of a moot point. But let me tell you how I thought about competitions then and how my thinking has changed. in case it's helpful. So I avoided the competition circuit because for several reasons. One was principle, because I just didn't like the idea of artistry being reduced to competition. I think another thing was just concern that knowing that I had to play in a way that judges would want to hear, at least if I wanted any chance of a prize, that would compromise the things that I wanted to say musically, and just compromise my, any attempted integrity as a performer. And I think the third thing was just simple fear, fear that going to a competition and getting anything less than first place would shoot yourself in the foot career-wise, and also just, quite frankly, the fear of wounded pride, which is something we just need to get over, right? Because we're always going to be surrounded by formidable artistic personalities, and especially in a subjective field like artistry. Some will like this, and some will like that, and even the great Heifetz, apparently there were a few violinists who he reportedly felt threatened by, and that's Heifetz, right? So even he wasn't without peer, and I think it's unfortunate if artistry comes down to feelings of being threatened, right? I think it's much healthier to look at the formidable talents around us and to embrace and be happy in what they have to offer. I think it's a much more healthy attitude to everything. Okay, but let me go back and talk about these 3 points and how my thinking has changed, in case it's helpful. So the principle that artistry is not reducible to competition. I agree. I still very much feel that's the case, and I think if we as performers think in terms of competition, that will doom us artistically. That said, the things that we call competitions, competition is kind of a sensational name, but everyone knows that there's subjectivity in it. Everyone knows that it's not as simple as a foot race where so-and-so clocks in at this and gets first place, and second place clocked in at that, and third place clocked in at that. Much more subjective. Applicants need to know that. Judges certainly know that, and so do the agents and managers that are listening. So bear that in mind. And I think a much healthier attitude is not going into competitions, to as though it's a hero show, where you have to compete and come out victorious in the competition. Really, it's much more a matter of going there, presenting what you have to offer, and just kind of putting that on the table and seeing if it matches with what a particular manager or agent is looking for. And if so, great. That's how careers are made. And if not, it's okay. There are other competitions. There are other agents and other managers. We can't live our lives trying to please everyone, and if we try, we'll be very unhappy people. In fact, I remember my teacher in Germany, Rainer Kussmaul, a late Berlin Philharmonic concertmaster. He was talking to me about Herbert von Karajan and a position that he won. I can't remember if it was his Berlin appointment or which it was, but Kussmaul was actually telling me that what worked in his favor is that he had gotten some negative reviews elsewhere, because the committee actually thought that if you had never gotten any negative reviews, you couldn't be a distinct enough artistic personality that anyone would have a distaste for your art. And in that case, you wouldn't be an ideal candidate for this position. So you see, trying to please everyone can actually work against you. Much better to, we can make reasonable accommodations, and I'll get there in a second. But do be true to yourself, and don't worry about pleasing everyone, and don't take it personally, certainly if you don't. So as far as the whole principle of competitions, yes, I still agree with that principle, but I don't attach it to the competition circuit the way I used to. I think it can be approached in a healthy way that doesn't breed a competing mindset. So the second concern about integrity and interpretation. Now this may be a moot point, because I do feel like if I were the person that I am now when I was younger, that I would feel settled enough in who I am to know that I could go out, and even if I had to were advised, let's say, to accommodate some things, I would feel comfortable in doing that without fearing that it was compromising my voice or what I wanted to share. Whether I would have felt comfortable then, whether I can't say. So that said, I would encourage you to be open to the possibility that you can You can do, if someone says, okay, no, don't do a glissando there, or don't do this, don't do that, that you can accommodate those things for a competition or an orchestra audition or whatever the case may be, while still keeping the essence of your musical voice. I do think that's possible, and I just encourage you to be enheartened by that if that's a concern in your mind, um, for whatever it's worth. So then the third thing is just fear that doing a competition and not getting a top prize um, will hurt your career, or wound your pride. I think we've already talked about wounded pride, but it's what can it do for your career? Um, it's absolutely fundamentally untrue that doing a competition and not getting top prize will hurt your career. Um, it just doesn't work like that at all. In fact, some of the biggest names didn't always get top prizes in competitions, and some people who do get top prizes don't have careers that are as illustrious as people who haven't gotten the top prizes. Um, the competition circuit is not one of negative credit, where if you don't get first prize in an event, that you lose your credibility as an artist. Instead, at least it seems to me, it's much more cumulative. It's a matter of being there and building up credit through the competition circuit and just having strong showings. Wherever you get placed in the competition, just being there. I have a number of friends who have have done the competition circuit, and a typical scenario might be when they start, they don't pass the elimination round for the first few competitions, and then along the way they garner a third prize here, a fifth prize here, second prize here, and whatever. And at the end of the day, people have heard them in enough contexts and seen that they are consistently good artists. And I'm not talking about mediocre players here. When I talk about like third place, fifth place, these are phenomenal players, phenomenal musicians, competing against other phenomenal musicians in a subjective climate, right? So bearing all of that in mind, but those, just those consistent, strong showings in competitions that then yield a few recognitions by judges. That's enough to convince artists and managers to take them on, and they have quite good careers. So if that's what you're looking for, then bear in mind that the competition circuit may be the way that you have to do that. At this point, I should probably also add that success in the competition circuit can translate significantly into other areas as well. It's not just the full-time solo career scene. It can, for example, up your chances of being considered for a leadership position in a major orchestra. It can also be very beneficial in the university scene, which is the route I took. And I ended up, that was part of my thinking as I was considering competition scene or not. And I thought, well, as much as I love playing the solo literature, concertos and recitals and whatnot, to do that full time and to do it with the frequency that you would be sufficiently profitable for a manager or an agent, you've got to be traveling almost constantly and just on the road for a significant portion of your life, and that can be really challenging to family, and it can also make it challenging to keep your performances fresh and to really delve deep into the literature that you're playing. And I went for the university route because it is the expectation for most universities that you remain active as a performer. And so if that's something that's interesting to you, make sure you check that on the job descriptions. Because as I say, most will, some won't, and depending on what you're looking for, you just want to be aware of that. But at the same time, I had hoped, and I think in many cases there is the possibility to really go and kind of delve deeper into the literature that you're playing, because you're not having to just produce performances in order to make your living, in order to stay current in the field. You have a little bit more liberty to kind of retreat and delve and then come out and perform, and I liked that balance. But I mentioned that in order to say that the conventional wisdom is that to get a university position, the DMA is necessary, and I do advise it if you have a university position, in your goals for now or the future, just because the market is so saturated that whatever credentials you have are very helpful. And especially with accreditation, a lot of universities need to be able to say, X percentage of our faculty have doctorates, and so it can be just a hoop that has to be jumped through, but it's still a hoop that has to be jumped through in many cases. That said, at the conservatory level, and for some really high level university positions in research universities and whatnot, I find that success in the competition circuit can be a really significant credential, and at least in some cases as important as a DMA. Same with successfully auditioning into a top tier orchestra. Those two carry a lot of weight when you're looking at high level university or conservatory teaching positions. Interestingly, it doesn't always work the other way around. For instance, having had a university position doesn't necessarily up your chances to being granted an audition with a major orchestra. So it's just something to be aware of. Okay, more briefly now, three final points. Keep your goals in mind and don't get distracted. It's very easy, especially when you're a young professional starting out, to feel this obligation to just take on everything. Now, sometimes we're just eager to garner experience and in kind of clutching at straws, hoping that something will yield something more substantive and more full time. Sometimes it's just that we really do need all of that work to pay the bills, and paying the bills is a good thing. I'm all in favor of that. But it's a matter of coming to terms with how do we pay the bills while keeping our activities streamlined toward what we want our ultimate goals to be. Again, feeling like we just have to take on everything, even if it doesn't really closely relate to what moves you artistically or where you see your career going. Just feeling like you have to take on everything that is related to violin playing can be more of a hindrance than a help, and there's no need to feel that you should do that. Better to streamline your activities as much as you can toward your goals. So keep your eyes on that goal and don't get unnecessarily encumbered by other things. In short, know how to say no. Number 5, stay connected. And honestly, this is one of the harder things for me. I'm an introvert, and I remember taking a class at one point in my education career about career matters, and the advice, much of it boiled down to just schmooze. And honestly, I hate schmoozing. I something just doesn't sit well in me with the idea of using a personal interaction or a relationship to advance oneself. As I feel like you're almost climbing on people, and that doesn't sit well with me, and I find it distasteful to imagine if I were on the other end of that and someone were just trying to schmooze me for their own advantage, and that whole paradigm is not one that I relish. So I don't advocate being a schmoozer. Can it help you get a career? Absolutely. But again, for me, that doesn't feel sincere. Now, if you're an outgoing and gregarious person, I'm not saying don't be yourself. I'm not saying that you should go around thinking, oh, am I schmoozing? Am I schmoozing? No, by all means, be yourself. Talk to people. But that's just the thing. Be yourself. And just be genuine. I think that's the most important thing. While being genuine, then stay connected, because it really is true that a lot of the doors that will open for you in your career depend on who you know, and you just want those to be, first of all, you want to have connections, and you want their impressions of you to be good impressions, and all the better if those are sincere impressions too, not just schmoozing, right? But it really is important to be well connected in the music world, because really at the end of the day we're all in this together. No one, I mean, it has been so quoted as to be cliche when they say no one's an island, but it's really true. I mean, if you're in an orchestra, of course, you're among a team of colleagues. Certainly if you're in a chamber group, it's a very close knit team of colleagues where the success of the group intimately depends on the success of each individual person. If you're teaching at a university, you're going to be hired by a team of faculty, and just the more you move in the music world, the more likely it is that there are going to be people in that context that you have known elsewhere. similar thing. If you're auditioning for management, perhaps the person you're auditioning for is someone you went to school with. These things are really important. And very often in the job search, if it comes down to two people or more, but let's say you've got two people who seem equally good, one of them is a known quantity and one's not. They're probably going to go with the known quantity just because they know that they won't go wrong with that person. Whereas the other person, it may be that they won't go wrong, but they just don't know. So being connected is really, really important. Um, 5, get guidance from those who know the current scene. That's a bit related to the last point. But don't be afraid to talk to people and ask questions. Really, that's one of the best things you can do. What are the pros and cons of such and such a line of work? What does life as an orchestra player look like, or a quartet player, or a soloist? What does it look like to be living that career? What's it like working in a teaching university as opposed to a research university? How do I plan my career while working toward my dream job? Do I need a DMA? Do I need to do competitions? Is this the right time? Should I wait? Which one should I do? All of those things are really important to be able to get advice from people who know the current workings of the scene. Otherwise, you're going to feel like you are ready, you have a lot to offer, and you just don't know where to turn, don't know where to look. And I think probably we've all encountered something like that to some degree, and have had to work through it. And we go on, and you will too. Sometimes feeling like one is foundering, that's a normal part of a young musician's experience. So don't lose hope. Do what you have to do. Again, to pay the bills, make ends meet. Keep your eyes on that goal. There's a lot of advice that I would give to my younger self, and I think that's probably true with most artists that you will encounter. So don't be afraid to build those relationships and to ask them. I'm always more than happy to give advice to younger people who are just wanting to know how things work. And again, I think it's the same for most artists. They're very happy to be able to share their experience and the things that they wish they had known, etc. So anyway, I hope these things are all helpful. To recap: know your field, be an artist, be substantive, be sincere, be yourself. Prepare well for when you come to the end of that runway, that you have enough momentum to take off. Keep your goals in sight and don't get bogged down with unnecessary things because you just feel like you need to take everything on. Stay connected and get guidance from those who know the field. And I think if you do those things, that will give you the foundation to sort through all the specific questions that your career pursuit will raise. So yeah, all the best. And as always, thanks for watching.